How do we work comfortably and efficiently in a kitchen? This is Open Mind Alexander Technique. I'm Jess. It's kitchen day. So this is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time and couldn't because I can't film in my tiny little apartment kitchen at home. There's no room to get a good camera angle so you can see what I'm doing. So welcome to the University of Denver's faculty workroom in my building. This happens to have a nice long counter and a sink that I can use and room for a camera. So we all need to have hobbies, and I'm here at about 9:30 at night on a Sunday because that's about the only time I could make sure that I would have uninterrupted access to the workroom without anybody coming in and either me getting in their way or them interrupting. So this is going to be the first video of this set. I'm going to do one on general kitchen use, working with a counter, sink, high cabinets, low cabinets, and then I'm going to do a second one that will come out later that is going to be hypermobility specific, and I have a couple tools and demonstrations that I'll be showing for that for my hypermobile kitchen. So keep an eye out for that if you are interested in that in the future. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at here is what are some basics that just about everybody I work with needs to know about how are we interacting with a place that a lot of us spend a lot of time, our kitchens. So this applies equally to anyone who is, working in a kitchen just at home occasionally, people who are really, into home cooking and very adept at that, very comfortable in a kitchen, as well as to folks who work in a kitchen for their jobs and food service folks. So this is all very similar stuff because we're all working with the same kind of logistical setups here. The main one is, what do we do with a countertop? The vast majority of students who come in to work with me approach countertops in the same way, and it looks like this. What have I done? Here's my neutral. Here's where people go. Actually, that's not, wait, there it is. I had to lock the knees back. So we saw a few different things change there, and this puts people into a habit and an organization, in a pattern that I have a particular name for. So compared to my neutral, what I had to do in order to go into this position in this pattern that I see from a lot of my students, I had to send my pelvis forward, curve in my back, especially my mid and upper back here is very curved. I had to pull my skull backwards, which I know is really counterintuitive, but stick with me here for a second. Your back goes up to your ears. Your top vertebrae connects between your ears behind your nose. If I curve the whole thing all the way to the top of my head and don't pull the skull back, I end up here. This is not where people go. They go here. What this actually made me do was have a forward curl in the spine and then pull the skull backwards into a kind of reverse curve. So I had that going on in the upper body, pelvis pushed forward, and then I had to lock my knees back, which I actually forgot to do because I don't normally habitually lock my knees anymore. So you end up knees, hips, curl back here. And I affectionately call this the question mark because you end up shaped like a question mark. So the question mark pattern is the biggest thing I teach people to avoid because what it does is it sends all of the weight for your upper body, your torso, anything you're holding in your arms, which in the kitchen can be a lot. It sends all of that curving back and down and really loads into your low back. So this is why, even if you actually aren't curving a ton in your low back, you can end up with a lot of low back discomfort, especially if you're there for long periods of time, for years. That's really going to take a lot of loading, and it's not comfortable doing that because what you've asked your vertebrae to do is kind of press down on that outer edge of the spine, and this goes shunk right into those low vertebrae, and they don't like doing that. So for starters, approaching my work surface here, get my knife out of the way. If I'm approaching my work surface, I can allow my pelvis to stay back. Now the rotation place for this is my hip joints. I've got tons of previous videos on how to find this, so feel free to go check those out if you want. So my hip joints on me are about this high, and then that's about the cross section for my right hip joint here. So it's about where these two fingers would meet in the center. It's very deep in there. My hip joint is what joins my leg to my torso. So everything from hip joint up is part of this torso and head tower. I really don't have to move the base of that tower back very far at all to be able to look down. This is a completely reasonable level of tilt. People can get behind me easily if you're working in like a professional or commercial kitchen. I'm not here. This is in the way. So here's my neutral. This is all I need in order to be able to work here really effectively. I can see right now with my eyeballs all the way down to the edge of the counter with no problem. So when I'm here and I'm working, I'm making sure that my torso tower stays quite neutral, and I'm just sending the base of the tower back just a little bit to allow the whole thing to tilt. That lets me look down. I'm also allowing my knees to release forward so that they're not locked back. So what I end up with is a miniature zigzag shape, to where my ankles at the bottom go forward towards my heels as we're on the way up. Go from my ankles forward and up towards my knees, back to my hip joints and my pelvis here, and then forward again to the head. So it's a mini zigzag shape. And that's how we're going to interact with everything that is forward and down, including the sink. Now, in order to get to the bottom of the sink, I'm going to need to increase this bend, but maybe not by as much as you would think. That's it, my hands are on the bottom of this now. It's fine. I really haven't bent all that much. And if I'm gonna be here for a long time, especially as someone who has worked a food service job, yeah, you're at the sinks for a while. I might do something like go into a miniature lunge and put one of my feet a little bit in front of the other, and then I can switch off which foot is forward. And that's going to give me a little bit of leeway there, using my nice shock absorber knees to let myself go up and over to go into the bottom of the sink and reach to the side and pivot from there. So this is all about using your legs. Kitchen work is all about legs. I know it doesn't feel like that a lot because you're often standing in a fairly confined space as far as, your physical location within the room, but moving efficiently with it, it's all about legs. The legs have to be available and nice and buoyant. These are your shock absorbers and ready to move. Human bodies, as well as any animal bodies, do not like being completely still for hours and hours at a time. That is a man-made invention that I'm not a fan of, and it's not good for us. So finding ways within the confines of reality of, yeah, I have to have a job. My job requires me to be here for a long time. Find little things that you can change that are within your control. For example, are your feet parallel to each other? Is one a little bit further back than the other? Can you switch something like every 5 to 10 minutes, just switch which foot is forward? Or if you're parallel, maybe you can stand at a little bit wider stance and then narrow. Lots of different ways that you can play around with that and just find kind of a menu of options to move through so that you're not trying to be in exactly the same position for an entire 8-hour shift. Let's look at looking at upper cabinets. This one has a latch I have to undo. There we go. So when I need to go back and forth between down and up, how have I arranged myself here? What do you see moving? The relationship between my head, my neck, my torso, all the way down to the bottom of my pelvis really isn't changing much because it doesn't need to. My spine doesn't need to make the nice flexible vertebrae stack there go into a sharp bend at any one spot. It's just not needed. What's much happier to make that movement and do the bending for me is my leg joints, especially my hip joints. So hips, knees, and ankles are almost always going to all bend together. And then as I'm reaching up, notice that I'm not doing it by putting a big curve into just my neck. This is how you can get into patterns of repeat strain if you're doing this for long periods of time, or like if you're carrying something heavy and you're trying to put something heavy up onto a top shelf, or like if you have something like an air fryer that lives on top of the fridge. Mind how you're doing it. It matters. So if I need to put something, I'm going to use whoever's mug this is, if I need to put this mug onto this shelf from the bottom of the sink, all I need to do is bend in my legs to be able to pick it up, and then there might be a bit of a forward lean in order to get it as far back onto the shelf as I need. But that's really about it. Oh, right, looking. So if we need to be looking way in the back, that requires a bit more consideration of how you're going to be doing this. If I'm going really up high, up to this very top shelf here, I'm going to use the dish soap just so I don't possibly accidentally drop anybody else's stuff. So if this soap needs to go all the way up to the top shelf and I need to be able to look at it, one, I can go up onto my tiptoes because for me at my height that makes sense. If it's too high up and I can't go onto my tiptoes, I can kind of track visually where that is in space until I get pretty close to it. And then I'm going to just lean forward. And I'm probably not going to look at it for the final push. So this is where if you're in control of what is on what cabinet, keep things that are not breakable. Don't put your really nice glasses on the very highest shelf. That's kind of a recipe for making a mistake, either in where you're placing it and knocking them together too hard. If you have like some nice thin wine glasses or something, maybe don't keep them on your highest shelf unless you have a situation like you can pull up a stool really easily in order to get up there if you're not tall enough to reach and be able to see on your own. All right, final thing we're going to look at today is going down to low cabinets. I've done a previous video on bending to like awkward low cabinets at a diagonal, so that's another one that you can check out for a similar resource. This is the exact same thing. We're actually just going to continue this same pattern that I used to get to the sink. My knees have gone forward, my hip joints are the rotation point for the bottom of my torso tower. That spot goes back, so I'm really counterbalancing. Something has gone forward, something else has gone back, and I'm quite balanced all the way down. And then from there, I just drop. I've had something go back, I've had something else go forward. I'm actually quite stable the whole way up and down, and it's just not a problem to manage that once you kind of get the hang of it. So from here, things to remember is, of course, if you're in a commercial kitchen, being very aware of what's around you, which you would need to be anyway, no matter how you're doing it. One option is to do it in a bit of a lunge that lets you really put a foot forward and lean if you really need to get under there. Another option, which I talk about a lot in the awkward low shelves video, is approaching a shelf like this or a cabinet like this diagonally. So then I can twist and pivot to be able to see underneath there and see what I'm doing. So right now I can see all the way to the back wall, and I can reach there quite easily because I've approached it diagonally and then spiraled around the axis of my spine to be able to reach. So to summarize here, what we're looking at with most kitchen movement, most kitchen activities is really about legs. That's a shift in brain focus and kind of priority for most people, especially those who are really taught a lot with like commercial kitchens or grew up hearing like cooking is all about how you're using your hands and handwork and knife awareness and all of that. Yeah, that's still absolutely there, and those are really valuable skills. But I think a lot of people really forget their legs. And they forget that our legs are what actually let us be there and interact with all of these objects all day. Particularly as someone who spent some time using mobility equipment. I was in a wheelchair for a while. I've used a walker, I've used canes, crutches after surgeries, various different things. We really take high counters for granted. So if you're a person who has never had to use a wheelchair and try to cook at the same time, consider yourself kind of lucky in that regard. It's almost impossible. It's very, very difficult to do. So our legs are what really allow us to interact with how most of these spaces are built. So I encourage you throughout your week to really think about how are your legs enabling you to interact with the world around you, especially in areas that, if this is your home kitchen, you might be very comfortable there. Thinking about it in a different way can bring a new level of awareness to how are you moving and how are you relating yourself in space to the environment that's around you.